welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fernelli. That's Danny Cannell. That's Bud Elliott. I'm Chip Patterson. We're coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and all across the 24/7 Sports Facebook network. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe. Smash that like. Come and join us in the chat. So much to get to here on a Monday because the coaching carousel is in full swing. Thanks to all of you that listened to
Monday, baby. Yeah.
Woo-hoo-hoo. I tell you what, boy.
Sound like Mike Leach.
That COVID-29 ain't no joke. All right, so thanks to all of you that listened to our instant reaction show. Luke Fickell to Wisconsin, the fallout that's coming from that. More on Cincinnati. You know, we were very much in the throes of the breaking news, as we do when those sirens hit your feed. And I think that we've had some more time to really hear about what Cincinnati's plans are and start to really reframe what that Cincinnati job is going to be. I will admit that I was like, oh, after we finished recording, I realized like, oh, that's a Big 12 job next year. Like,
yeah,
like
this fast.
Like this offseason, we are going to be having that realignment. So how does that play into the conversation? We've got more buzz that we've had all throughout Sunday. We had a listener request for some Western Michigan talk. Cannot promise it, but hey, it's on the spinning carousel. Maybe it will come up. But we want to begin with what we thought was going to be just a little bit of a formality or potentially a little bit of a certainty. We get the news that Lane Kiffin was signing an extension with Ole Miss and that things were starting to move in the direction of Hugh Freeze. Multiple reports had indicated that the conversations had been going on for weeks. They were just finalizing the details. No Hugh Freeze news. No Hugh Freeze news. No Hugh Freeze news. And then this morning, our own Dennis Dodd hearing pushback on Auburn administration, the football hire now that Lane is staying at Ole Miss. Plan A was Lane. Plan B was Freeze. Don't know if Auburn had a plan C. Bears watching. Again, that coming from our own Dennis Dodd. So before we get into some of the news and the job openings that I think we've got a little bit more concrete information on, let's get into what is a little bit of a difficult or tricky situation. It's tough to navigate. There's a lot of passion going on within this conversation. So what is happening at Auburn and what piece of this do you feel the most certain about?
The piece I feel the most certain about is Auburn happening and dysfunction happening in a coaching search. As for after that, I don't know.
Yeah, there's so many kind of balls up in the air here, right? So what do we know? I think it's pretty well accepted at this point that Auburn wanted Lane Kiffin, right?
Yes.
I suspect that was AD John Cohen's choice, okay? When that fell through, it got fairly well circulated. Now, was that by Hugh Freeze's camp or by Auburn people or both, that Hugh Freeze was the backup choice? I think that's probably true, but I would question whose backup choice, right? Was that fully John Cohen's choice? I know we've spoken on the air before how Cohen was the AD for Dan Mullen at Mississippi State when, Mississippi State was actively trying to narc on Ole Miss and get them in trouble and have their players talk about some of the recruiting inducements and things that they were allegedly offered by people associated with Ole Miss. So again, I'd be a little bit surprised if that was really Cohen's plan B, but my suspicion here is that it was a lot of people at Auburn's plan B. And now, according to Dennis Dodd, there's some pushback on that, as probably well there should be. You have to be concerned that a guy is actively DMing a girl, right? Who didn't make any allegations against football, right? At least on Freeze's team, just out of the blue, jumping into people's DMs, which is not new for him. And it's not a good look at all for a guy who's had his past to do that. And I think it raises some questions about his self-control. And if you're an Auburn administrator, not an Auburn booster, that might worry you some. I mean, there's plenty of guys who can get the job done at Auburn. You don't need to hire Hugh Freeze.
I think it is important. I'm glad you mentioned that because one thing
and it's new. It goes against the whole change narrative, right? Like that's a new thing. That's from this summer. It's
what I have seen from the pushback and the campaign of emails that are being sent to Auburn's administration regarding the potential hire of Hugh Freeze. is less to do with what happened at Ole Miss, if not nothing to do with what happened at Ole Miss, because now there's blowback to the blowback, right? Now we're starting to get the columns about forgiveness. Now we're starting to get the messages about, it's like, well, I know people who have done that. Like this is not about, in my opinion, this is a pushback that is coming from the handling, the potential tampering, the interference with any kind of sexual violence investigations, right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I don't want to like step in this here, which is why I'm glad we have a group, not a one-man show where you can just come out here and, hang yourself on this one. But I think that the what happened at Ole Miss, both in terms of the NCAA violations and both in terms of his own personal life, does not seem to be at the center of what is some pushback and a campaign for pushback against Hugh Freeze, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Have you guys been DM'd by Hugh Freeze?
Yes.
No.
I have. So we got half the show. He's definitely a DMer. Like
I'm shocked you haven't been, bud. Your DMs are open, right?
They weren't for a while.
Oh, okay.
I don't know that. The one thing I'm more along the lines with Tom. Like the one thing I feel certain of is that Auburn, this search is going to be dysfunctional, just like the last offseason was just a complete dumpster fire. And remind me again, what number coach was Brian Harsin for them to go through before they, realized, oh, we got to hire somebody? Like, I think this is the thing that's always fascinating to me is that you feel like you're in a position to get whoever you want. We got deep pockets. We can write checks with anybody. And then all of a sudden you come to the realization, oh no, there's one down. Lane's done. Now, we're getting pushback. Like at some point, where's the self-realization that maybe you're not the destination job that you think you are? I think it can be a good job, but I also think there might be some coaches out there who don't want to get into this mess. So I think this thing could get dicey in a hurry. I do think once they look at the other options available, I do think Hugh Freeze would be the guy. I think he'd be a good coach for them. I think he'd be able to win there, but it's not going to play out nice and smooth as everyone thinks it is.
See, like that's my concern about Hugh Freeze is even if you just completely erase everything that's already happened, just based on how he is and the fishbowl that Auburn job is and how dysfunctional it is, do you really want a coach who's out here DMing anybody about anything that they might say about him, seems to have very thin skin? He seems to respond to anything that is said about him and is concerned about how he is perceived by other people. I think he's a very good football coach. I think he did a terrific job at Ole Miss. I don't know if I want to kind of have to deal with some of the potential headaches that would pop up if he's my coach at Auburn.
It's also a very different conversation to be had if you're an Auburn fan who just cares about winning, right? Or if you're an administrator who has to supervise Hugh Freeze. It's a very different conversation because if you're an Auburn fan, whether he's truthful to the people that employ him doesn't really matter to you, right? You just care about the wins and losses on Saturday. You show up, you cheer, right? You follow the recruiting, that kind of stuff. But if you're John Cohen, if you're Auburn's president, your ass is kind of in the jackpot. If he goes there and does something that embarrasses you again because you have prior warning.
Can't you have a clause or something that says, hey, we're going to run your social media? Or are you worried about other stuff? I mean, seriously, can't you do that? Like, hey, we're going to have somebody run your social media.
At least get a private cell phone, right?
Right.
All of a sudden you're getting DMs from Hugh F987602413.
Yeah. It's entirely possible they just hire like a crisis PR firm and push this through at some point. Maybe they find a time to media dump it or to, just kind of news dump it. But do you want to be news dumping your head coaching hire at what I think
Auburn?
Right. It's it's absolutely a top 25 job, right? At minimum.
Yes.
Due to the pay and the recruiting
in a vacuum.
Yeah. Even with all the Auburn nonsense, it's still a great job because of the amount of money you're going to make, the amount of money you can pay your coordinators, the players you can recruit, the titles you can compete for. It's still a great job. Even that's why we're leading the show with it. I think there's a lot better candidates than Hugh Freeze, man. Honestly, like they don't have the kind of baggage
with proven track records.
I think so. Yeah.
So who are those names?
Yeah, I'm curious to know too.
What about Chadwell? Right. What about Jeff Brom?
Mm-hmm.
Those guys are really good schemers. They've achieved a lot at places that are tough.
Have they won in the SEC? Have they beaten Bama? Like, that's the thing I think that matters to Auburn are those things. Now, they might be better coaches. I would agree with you on that. I think they might be safer and they have just as much upside. But can you sell that as, hey, this guy has beaten Nick Saban, the thing that we want to do, and he's won at a program with less resources than we can give to him?
I mean, look, he's not beaten Bama. No.
They
also haven't gotten fired.
Auburn can't sell Coastal Carolina's coach.
That's kind of what I'm alluding
No,
to.
they want SEC experience. I get it.
But I mean, what's not to sell about freaking Jamie Chadwell? The guy took Coastal and it's got a really fun offense and he wins a lot of games. Like, there's plenty to sell. If you're looking for a coach who has proven he can beat Nick Saban, you have a very limited pool of coaches you are able to choose from, because you're not getting Kirby, you're not getting Dabo, you're not. I mean, it's like,
okay, all right, hold on. So what about a coach that maybe not has beaten Nick Saban, but has led to losses for Nick Saban? Bill O'Brien. If you want,
good luck trying to roll that one out.
Bama fans would love that.
If you want to take down Alabama, get the man who nearly ended the dynasty as offensive coordinator, Bill O'Brien, as the next head coach.
Do you guys know why has the Deion Sanders smoke seemed to be fading? Was that all created by him and his people, where it's not legitimate?
Yeah, I don't think that Deion Sanders was a legitimate candidate at Auburn. Nothing I've heard like from people who I trust there, and you hear a lot of different things. Nothing I've heard was that he was a real candidate there.
But like you said, when it comes to this Auburn job, you hear so many different things. It's like, and it's you have absolutely no idea who knows anything or what you're hearing, if there's any modicum of truth to any of it. And then it's going to end up being somebody that they just kind of pull out of a hat. That's my official prediction. I don't know who it's going to be, but it is not going to be a name we've heard yet. That's my prediction.
And what's crazy is the clock is ticking, which is why all of these other hires are being made as soon as possible, because we have 1 week till the transfer portal opens. We have 3 or 4 weeks until the early signing day. Like, you need to get on this and get on this soon. And yet you can't make a panic hire but this is where, how can you not have all these decisions made and your ducks in a row so that, all right, as soon as it's done, we're done. They got played. Everyone gets played by Jimmy Sexton. It's unbelievable.
I think they might have thought that that they knew that Hugh Freeze would say yes, and that if Lane says no, we go Hugh Freeze, then we'll move on that. And now they're getting peppered with emails that are being sent to Bud's point, administrators who are a little bit, like, oh, okay, wait. Let's wait. Let's see what happens here.
But to Bud's point earlier, we don't know that it was Cohen who viewed Freeze as the backup option to Lane Kiffin. I mean, we've seen how this has worked at Auburn before. They had like a coup attempt with their last coaching search to find the AD wanted to do one thing, the boosters wanted to do something else. I feel like Hugh Freeze is a booster hire, not an AD hire.
And they'll never sell it that way, obviously, if they do. Oh, the boosters definitely have more power than Cohen. Ultimately, like this is how this works. The boosters are like owners in the NFL, and they ultimately call the shots. If they now, most of these dudes are not actually going to pull donations if you do this or that. They might, kind of grovel about it, but most of them will go along with it within reality, at least for a little while. Cohen's a respected AD. I look, nobody's in a better position to know the good and the bad. Not nobody, but few are in a position to know the good and the bad of Hugh Freeze than John Cohen. Mississippi State was digging on him, right? You don't think they had like their own investigators looking into his stuff at their main chief rival? They damn sure did. So I'm not going to totally rule out Hugh Freeze to Auburn. They could news dump this thing. We've also, there's rumors out there about Auburn having interest in James Franklin. There's rumors out there about, what about, here's the thing.
He's won.
What if the real backup plan was Sonny Dykes and TCU just kept winning and winning and winning, right?
Go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say, when we were talking about it the other day on the show, Franklin is the coach I was hinting at. I wasn't dropping the name, but I mean, the rumors are kind of out there now. But it's, yeah.
Do you think that they are rumors because James Franklin is, well, obviously we talked about him when USC opened. We talked about him when LSU opened. Is it because he fits that mold of he's proven, he's got SEC experience. He's been able, this season has been fantastic for James Franklin.
Mm-hmm. And
He went
it's a
10-2.
much easier. It'd be a much easier sell right now than it would have been at LSU or USC last winter. He's recruited well at Penn State. Like you said, he's got the SEC experience. Like, he checks a lot of the boxes for what Auburn would want. And as we've seen with Brian Kelly and with Lincoln Riley, you can't rule anything out. And if you're Penn State right now, you've got to deal, like you had to deal with Ohio State. But now Michigan is looking like the actual big dog on the block in the Big Ten. But Ohio State's not going anywhere. You've got USC coming. If you're James Franklin and you're kind of looking at the future of the conference, maybe you're feeling like this is the time to jump.
If you think he's got a squad coming back next year,
the
just
timing would be weird.
He just signed a new deal, right? A new
Mhm.
10-year contract.
Yeah, it was Franklin and Tucker both got the massive deals during the last coaching cycle.
I don't know what the buyout is, but I mean,
money's not real.
Yeah,
no. Every coaching contract was signed through FTX. So,
oops. Okay, so when do we think a move on Auburn should be expected? Anytime, like, who knows?
Before December 5th, because that is the day the transfer portal opens wide. So within a week, probably. But
do you guys think Sonny Dykes is still in play?
I mean, look, the Big 12 title game is abjectly meaningless unless they just get their absolute doors blown off. Like, TCU is in with a loss. I'm confident of that.
Mm-hmm.
So unless they lose by like 28 and he's all of a sudden available and Auburn just does a total rainmaker offer and Sonny Dykes wants to take on the challenge and take the benefits of Auburn, then maybe, but that's a whole lot of ifs, guys. I wonder if he would have been in the running more if TCU had not kept just winning, right?
Maybe.
I mean, the guy's going to have a playoff team to coach.
I mean, coaching carousels every single year filled with sliding doors, right? Yeah, they're like, if this team hadn't won or if this hadn't happened, then maybe another coach would have been hired. It's why there's so much uncertainty at this point right now.
Is Fickle at Wisconsin if they had not made the playoff last year? I don't think so. I think he probably would have taken another job.
Might be at Notre Dame. You might be at USC.
Right.
Might be at LSU. Who knows?
Well, Wisconsin's happy about that. We're starting to see a little bit of movement on the Georgia Tech front. I don't have anything updated on my end on the Colorado front. We saw more jobs come open. Willie Taggart fired at FAU. We've got Jake Spavital fired at Texas State. Philip Montgomery fired at Tulsa. Tim Lester fired at Western Michigan. The Cincinnati job, of course, as we mentioned, is open. What from the coaching carousel sort of stands out as the next piece or the next story that you all are following?
I mean, I think we are waiting on Auburn because the domino effect it could potentially have elsewhere, right? Like, they're the one school out there that you think would pull a coach from an active P5 school
and set off the dominoes, because none of the other open jobs are on that level.
Mm-hmm.
Georgia Tech is a Power 5 job. Colorado is a Power 5 job, but they are existing in very different stratospheres than where the Auburn football program is. Correct. We got reports that Georgia Tech was interviewing Willie Fritz, the Tulane head coach, which is what they're like. That's run the triple, but don't run the triple.
Yeah, I think it's a very sensible, logical kind of move, because it's maybe what they should have done the first time, because transitioning from the triple to a regular kind of pro style, whatever you want to call it, offense is really hard to do and takes time. Maybe you could have gone with somebody like Fritz, who has plenty of experience running the triple from his time at Georgia Southern, but whose offense isn't just a traditional triple option offense. It's the same thing I thought when I thought Jamie Chadwell would be a perfect fit for Georgia Tech, and is still somebody I think would be a perfect fit for Georgia Tech. So yeah, I think it makes sense. I think the timing is obvious. He's about to, he might win a conference title with Tulane, which is something I don't think Tulane's done since, don't know, the 60s or the 80s. I can't remember the last time they won a conference title anywhere, but or no, 1998. Never mind, Tom, you idiot. They went 12-0.
No,
Anyways,
but it's only 2 conference championships. One's an SEC title in the 60s, and then one's
yes,
the Conference USA title in the 90s.
Yeah.
correct. But anyways, I think that makes sense. I think it could be good, but we'll see. I don't know if Willie Fritz is going to be taking that job the week before his team's playing in a conference championship game.
Oh yeah,
We saw it though a lot with Billy Napier took Florida before the American Championship game last year.
Yeah, but he
Stuck
didn't have
around.
there wasn't a New Year's 6 berth on the line.
oh yeah, that's true. Do you think that? So we've mentioned Jamie Chadwell a little bit. Bud, is Troy going to lose its head coach?
To Tulane?
Oh, you think that there's no way that jump could be made to Georgia Tech?
From John Summerall?
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't heard that he's in the mix at Georgia Tech. I think both the guys coaching in the Sun Belt championship game actually would probably do a pretty damn good job at Georgia Tech. Like the Sun Belt has some pretty good coaches in it, in my opinion. I don't know that. Well, I don't know that Georgia Tech would pick Fritz over or would pick Chadwell over Fritz, to be honest. Just because like Tulane, you do have to deal with some academic stuff, and obviously that is a commonality they have with Georgia Tech. They're like down here in Florida, there is a lot of chatter about Chadwell and USF. So I'd be curious to see how that goes. Honestly, like I know it's not a P5 job, and that would be disappointing, I think, for him. But I do believe it's a step up from Coastal, clearly, and like their ability to take spare parts and create fun offense from it, and the bounce back transfers you can get at USF, dudes from the state of Florida who sign with an NC State or Wisconsin or somewhere out of state, it's not working out for whatever reason. You take them as a bounce back transfer, get a lot of speed. I think they could make something work there at USF probably. It's a pretty creative staff. I don't know where Tulane goes, right? I mean, I think you'd have to potentially look at promoting Chris Hampton, who's done a really nice job for them as a defensive coordinator and a quality recruiter for them as well. I don't know what Tulane pays. Does anybody have an idea what Fritz makes?
I don't have it off the top of
It's
my head.
a private school.
No, I'm more on the level of the fan here. I say that money's fake everywhere, and just
Yeah.
like
Sure seems that way because every time it's like, how are they going to get that done? They figure out a way.
yeah.
That USF job's going to be interesting though, because with the void that's going to be left behind, the vacuum, like you can fill that and become competitive, I would think, pretty quick, be in the running for a conference championship, and then have access to the playoff. Like I think, and then you're seen as a savior.
Yeah.
Like I think it's a pretty attractive spot right now, especially with those 4 teams, leaving, or 3.
Do they have the buy-in though? Like, 'cause
from
UCF
the administration.
Yeah, because like UCF has been a very clear from the top down. We've known what UCF's goals have been for a long time. Does USF have that same kind of buy-in to achieve it? Because it takes more than just being located in Florida.
Yeah, it does. I mean, they have the bounce house. They got their own stadium.
Mm-hmm.
It does feel like there's more fervor around the program than a USF fan base.
So
yeah, UCF has a different level of buy-in, or at least has. I mean, USF's trying to get there. USF missed its window to level up. UCF's going to the Big 12. USF is not going anywhere fast, but they do have a chance to have like a top third, dollar-wise buy-in within the New American.
So speaking of that reshuffling, where does Cincinnati look? Because when we were on the Instant Reaction podcast, Bud mentioned is like, so what do you think's better, Cincinnati or Texas Tech? We're like, oh yeah, Cincinnati. But what about across the entire reshuffled Big 12? Where does Cincinnati stack up in the new Big 12? Which again, like for a year, we'll have Texas and Oklahoma. But once we get Texas and Oklahoma out the paint, we're looking at the future of this conference with the UCF and Houston also added to the mix, BYU added to the mix, and the remaining teams and programs that are there. What is the selling point for Cincinnati as they go look to hire a replacement for Luke Fickell?
I mean, I don't know. It's hard to know what the top tier of the conference is right now. Like yes, if you look at how things have gone the last 2 years, you'd say, well, TCU, Baylor seems to be like a tier 1 after Oklahoma and Texas, even Oklahoma State. But none of those programs are in a position to where I don't think a UCF or a Cincinnati or like a BYU and maybe even Houston, if things go right, could not compete right away. So it's hard to say. If we're trying to rank the jobs,
I don't think that this is going to be a situation where you show up to the league and you fall to the bottom.
no.
I think if we're selling the job, Cincinnati is a better job than Iowa State. I think Cincinnati is a better job than Kansas.
Yes.
I think Cincinnati is a better job than Kansas State.
Disagree.
Yes. Really?
No, yeah, I think Cincinnati or Kansas State has a better coaching situation. I think they're a more established program. I think their NIL game is much stronger. Like, we know that, certain other schools try to come take Kansas State's quarterback commit and they kept him. To me, that signals strong NIL. I do not think Cincinnati's a better job than Kansas State right now. I think Kansas State is more prepared to operate as a good Power 5 program.
Is Cincinnati better than Oklahoma State?
No.
TCU? No.
Definitely not.
Texas Tech?
Yes.
Similar.
I was going to say that feels similar.
Yeah. I don't think
Tommy Tuberville didn't think it was similar.
Was he going to get fired at Texas Tech?
Well, I mean, he was
eventually, yeah. But
he would have for walking out on that dinner. We're not even paying. What a jerk. Yeah, is it better than West Virginia?
Yeah, I think so.
It's similar. Like, West Virginia had a really good record in the old Big East, old American, and then they found out real quick how much tougher the Big 12 was than what they were playing in.
I think the recruiting footprint of Cincinnati makes it a better job than West Virginia.
Yeah, because you don't have to drive very far to find talent for Cincinnati. Like West Virginia, I don't know what the high school situation as far as recruiting there is, to just like a plethora of guys ready to step in and play Power 5 football.
Well, but don't you have to go to Florida?
You do. Yeah. Look, I mean, my thing is West Virginia is thinking it's going to steal Oregon's AD or Oregon State's AD, which I don't think is going to happen. But just the fact that they think they could pull that off is probably indicative of maybe the money they have to throw around. But I think those are similar jobs. Like, I don't think Cincinnati and West Virginia have a massive gap between each other.
All right, so now let's go against the other rivals. Is Cincinnati better job than BYU?
Yes. The institutional issues you have at BYU as far as who you can take in, I think are, yeah.
Is Cincinnati better job than Houston?
Equal.
Yeah, same.
And then UCF?
No.
Pretty similar. I mean, I think, like, I want to see how much UCF's NIL stuff steps up. They're definitely building.
Yeah, we got to see how, like, the same situation for Cincinnati. It's going to be, you got to see how they adapt to a new conference and a new kind of geographical footprint. But I think that in a vacuum, UCF's a better job than Cincinnati.
Cincinnati, based on our rapid analysis, is a top half job in a Power 5 conference.
Yeah.
They can take this to market, and they should be able to get an extremely qualified candidate. They don't need to pluck somebody on the way up. They should be able to take somebody potentially from another sitting Power 5 job. I didn't necessarily have that in mind when we first started talking about it. And we were like, which, by the way, if it is Urban, please be Urban. I'm just going to say that again. If Urban Meyer, graduate of Cincinnati, is it University of Cincinnati or Cincinnati University? It's University of yeah. Urban Meyer, University of Cincinnati graduate. If you want to come on back to college football, the Bearcats will have you. That drive to Urban Meyer's Pint House, it's not too far. You can make this happen.
Oh, it's also behind Baylor. We didn't ask about Baylor.
Oh, yeah, because he said, Tom said TCU and Baylor's definitely, like, seems like top tier, which are, like, interesting because from a university perspective, are they both getting the boost of being a better jobs because they're private schools with a lot of money, resources? Like,
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I would push back a little bit on the idea that Cincinnati can pull a sitting Power 5 head coach. It is absolutely a bottom half of the Power 5 job, right? Every SEC job is better except for maybe Vandy, right? I think we would agree on that.
Do you think Cincinnati could pull Matt Campbell? because that's a sitting Power 5 head coach.
I don't think Cincinnati wants Matt Campbell if what the AD said about valuing recruiting is
understand,
an
but
accurate
I'm saying,
reflection of what he wants.
do you think it could if it wanted to? I'm just
No.
challenging your statement.
I don't, because I think Iowa State has more realistic expectations than what Cincinnati will probably have. Cincinnati is going to have a tough time with this, in my opinion, because they have been so damn good. They are averaging over 10 wins a year. They just made the playoff. There's a really good chance that they are losing, 2 to 6 games per year in conference play in the Big 12. It's going to be a really tough act to follow, and it's hard to sit here and tell your boosters, hey, guys, this is such a step up in competition. It's going to take a while. Now, maybe you sell it as, I've been in this league. I can guide you into this league. I know the pitfalls and the challenges of this league. I know what it takes to win in this league. But that's still a tough sell if you start out and all of a sudden you look over in the loss column and you got 8 in the first 2 years, which is very possible. Like, you jump this Cincinnati team in the Big 12 this year. Would they lose in the American 3 times? Twice? Yeah. I mean, you probably have 4 or 5 losses in the Big 12 this year with the Cincy team. That's 9-3.
I don't agree.
And they're losing a lot of guys to the transfer portal, and they don't have a quarterback going forward, it doesn't appear.
I don't agree that it's that difficult of a transition. We have proof of concept. TCU joined the Big 12 when it had Texas and Oklahoma, and it was winning the conference in its 3rd year there.
That's fair. That's really fair. They
and
also
Missouri showed up in the SEC and won the daggum East. There's context there, but also there are levels to that. Like, asking you to come and make a splash in the Big 12 is different than asking you to come and make a splash in the SEC.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't think. I think it's because this is new ground. It's we've dealt with this where new programs join conferences. We're not seeing the kind of changes that we're seeing in this, where it's like 4 new teams are coming in as the 2 powers are leaving. So it's really hard to know for sure. But I don't think there's that big of a gap from being where Cincinnati has been the last few years to being a competitive team in the Big 12. At least not the new one.
All right, so the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years before West Virginia joined, right? In their league, 7-0, 5-2, 5-2, 5-2, 5-2, 5-2, 5-2. Since joining, 4-5, 2-7, 5-4, 4-5, 7-2, 5-4, 6-3, 3-6, 4-5, or 4-4, 4-5, and whatever they are this year. The Big 12 seems about 2 losses harder per year from a really good, Big East team than it is now.
But with the total reset, I think that you tell your boosters, if we get this higher right, then we jump up into the top tier.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm just saying, like, there's no USF, there's no Tulsa, there's no Temple on the schedule, right?
Correct. But, I mean, there's West Virginia on the schedule.
That's true.
No, but I mean, I get what you're saying, but I think that, like, I don't think West Virginia, when it left the Big East for the Big 12, was in anywhere near as good a shape as Cincinnati is leaving the American for the Big 12. And I also think it was at a further disadvantage because at the time, like, it was just way the hell off by itself in the Northeast, playing a conference that was centered in the middle of the country. Whereas that's not going to be the case for Cincinnati. It has West Virginia nearby. It's got UCF down in Florida. I mean, it's not close, but it's more geographically aligned, I think, with the Midwest or the Prairie, which is the Big 12's home, than West Virginia ever was.
Who are the guys in TV do you think would make sense for one of these jobs? I'm looking at Tom Herman and Dan Mullen as kind of the 2 bigger names there. Do you think either one? Because I think they're in a position too where they only want to take a spot where they can win and where they can possibly contend for a playoff. So I do think Cincinnati would be a pretty good fit for that option.
Great fit for Tom Herman, in my opinion, because, he was at Houston, he was at Texas, and Cincinnati will want to make sure that it gets somebody that can get in and try to recruit in that Big 12 footprint. I think that Herman would be a great hire for Cincinnati to try and go make a splash in that conference.
I think Herman makes a lot of sense.
He was also, let's see, how long was he at Ohio State? Not long, though.
Probably a few years, right?
2 or 3 years, I think.
3 years. So, 3 years of recruiting and working your way around the state of Ohio as well. So,
he's got a ring he can wear around the state to show people.
Let's see. Also a couple years at Iowa State. Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see, because do you think that, again, are we setting all of these jobs? One last point on this. Are we setting all these jobs at December 5th? You want to get this thing filled by December 5th, or else we got some problems on our hands?
How much can you
Ideally.
really do in 24? Like, let's just say, I mean, what if it's done the third? Like, don't you need a full week to make sure guys aren't entering? I mean, the other thing too is once you enter, they're not necessarily gone, so you could salvage it. I don't know. I wonder if we're putting too much on that date. And it's like, I think the signing day is the most important one because you got to get a class filled.
Yeah, but it's also, I think the reason it's not just convincing your own guys to stay, it's getting in the groundwork to convince guys to come. And if you're not in charge on December 5th, there's a bunch of other schools who are talking to that kid already who you haven't had a chance to talk to. So you've got to dig yourself out of that hole to start.
Well, it is the coaching carousel, which means that it will be a constant thread of our conversation as we continue through the rest of this week and next week, and probably the rest of the month, depending on what happens. Who knows? Who is the magical the mystery team from the baseball rumor days? Who is that rabbit in the hat that John Cohen's going to pull out? Are we going to see the dominoes starting to fall? We will, of course, be giving you updates on all of that. Coming up on the other side, it is a Monday, so we do need to give you our Upon Further review. We'll get into that and more next.
I kept my mouth shut for 25 years.
Now that you're back, I want you to go to Tulsa.
Not exactly the welcome I was expecting. What crew runs this neighborhood?
No crew up in here in the middle of nowhere.
I'll protect you from the gangs.
What gangs?
Get down!
You got a pretty good appetite for someone who was just shot at.
Tulsa King. New series now streaming exclusively on Paramount Plus.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, and we have been giving out some Paramount Plus 30-day free trials to a premium plan, and we're going to do it again today. So if you are among the many, many, many watching us live right now, our watchers to likes, I don't like that ratio, my friends. So let's get those likes up. We see it hit 150 likes on the video on youtube.com/cover3. We will give out 3 Paramount Plus 30-day free trials. So go ahead and smash that like. We appreciate it in advance. Once we hit that, we'll give the all call for you to find out how you can get that 30-day, be one of the lucky viewers to get that 30-day free trial. Okay. Upon further review, we had our final regular season Saturday is now in the books. A little bit of time to comb through some of the other results. It was a very extensive instant reaction show. That's what happens when you've got some of the drama and some of the ups and downs that we saw from a wild and chaotic Saturday in all of college football. Where do we want to begin for Upon further review? I've got one.
Oh, go ahead, Chip.
Okay. I do not think that there is any motivation for Duke head coach Mike Elko to make a move after just one season. I think that when he was brought in by athletic director Nina King, it was always going to be that this was a true building project. But man, if I was an athletic director, I wish that I could get Mike Elko, who I think is probably going to be in the line for ACC Coach of the Year honors. The Blue Devils finished 8-4 after beating Wake Forest on Saturday, a game that we didn't get a chance to highlight a lot. A heartbreaking loss on the over-under, by the way. We had Wake Forest storming down the field, trying to go and get themselves a touchdown that would get them over the total. But it was that Duke defense that got an interception. And to me, what stands out about this Duke season under Mike Elko is the fact that last year we saw a strong start with Kansas and Northwestern wins, and then it just cratered near the end. And of course, that might have been the end of the David Cutcliffe era. But after a strong start, take the loss to Kansas, a really, really bad loss at Georgia Tech in a game that they let slip away. Then North Carolina stormed back and beat them. And maybe you could have seen that happen again. Heck, the game against Miami, very next time out, bad mistakes right off the jump, special teams errors. And you're like, okay, is this going to be the Duke football that we've come to know? But it's not. Duke goes on to win 4 out of the last 5 games, and letting the game slip away against Pitt was absolutely disappointing. But in that stretch, 4 out of 5 wins against Miami, Boston College, Virginia Tech, and Wake, only a 2-point loss at Pitt on the road. The Blue Devils finish 8-4. It is the 1-2-3 tied for the 4th best record in the entire ACC. I ask you, where does that stack among some of the best and most impressive coaching jobs that you've seen all season?
I think it's extremely impressive. I mean, Elko came in there. I do think there is something to be said for Duke not treating last year seriously, and at the baseline level of talent at Duke last year was better than the record showed, right? Cutcliffe made a bunch of moves last year to move guys around at different positions and give them new titles and things. There's some thought that maybe he did that to increase the hireability of some of the guys on his staff, knowing knowing he was probably going to leave, right? This guy gets a new coordinator title. This guy gets a new assistant head coach title, all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying they didn't try, but I do think that the level of player on Duke was better than last year showed. And Elko and his staff have done a tremendous job at using that talent. Obviously, you can't go portal nuts at Duke. And so they schemed it up well. They really hit on quarterback. We need to also acknowledge here that the rest of the Coastal totally collapsed. But he's done a really good job. He's probably going to win Coach of the Year in the ACC, right?
Either that or Norvell, because that's the problem is Mike Norvell is going to be another great argument as well for what he's been able to do in Tallahassee.
Both 5-3 in the conference.
Yeah. But from the who did more with less, which is where I was looking, like it's a great barometer of who's coaching the best. I mean, I was just looking up Duke's win total before the season was 3.5.
Yep.
Florida State's was 7.5. Now they went over it, but this is a totally different standard of what Elko just did at Duke. I think it's phenomenal here for them. I think he should be up for the Coach of the Year. And the only thing is, I'm curious, why doesn't it get talked about more? Now, this is some of the ACC, lack of love for the conference.
We give it. Don't worry.
We tried.
Don't worry.
We tried, dang it.
Yeah, but even Tom is come on.
But even still, listen to how we've pinned this. When Vanderbilt gets a couple back-to-back wins in the SC, it's like, woohoo, way to go, Vanderbilt. Oh, man, they must be getting good. At Duke, it's like, conference sucks. Maybe it's more about Duke getting better than it is about everything else. The conference has struggled, though. I'm not going to make the case for the ACC, but I think it is a tribute to Mike Elko.
He was an assistant under Dave Clawson at multiple stops.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, boy, that's the other side of this. Dave Clawson lost to NC State. Dave Clawson lost to North Carolina. Dave Clawson lost to Duke. This is a disappointing finish for a Demon Deacons team that at the end of September, they go into overtime or double overtime against Clemson. They beat Florida State, and we're excited. We're thinking that the Demon Deacons might be the second best team in the ACC. They're the other side of this coin where they finish now with 4 losses in the final 5 games and a disappointing finish for the Demon Deacons here at the end of the year as Dave Clawson gets upended by his former assistant in a close and competitive game that it sends these two programs into the offseason in very different directions.
Bud has mentioned a couple times he senses that there's something off in that program right now. We've also seen Clawson's name since David Shaw surprised us all at 3 a.m. by resigning. We've seen Clawson's name come up in all the candidate lists at Stanford. Do you guys, as the ACC trio of this show, do you guys see a scenario in which he would leave Wake for the Stanford job, or is that just people connecting dots of he's at a private school with academic requirements?
I think he'd be crazy to leave because you're getting into a worse situation with more challenges. Like, he's proven you can win at Wake, and Shaw did too, but it just feels like the changing landscape is one school is headed one direction, the other is headed another.
So,
I have not checked in this week, but I know that the administration is not at all an obstacle for Dave Clawson. I mean, there are institutional challenges, sure, but that the Wake Forest administration is fully behind Dave Clawson. There is a well-funded collection of power players who have already led to a rapid upgrade in facilities and into some of the infrastructure around Wake Forest football. And I think that Dave Clawson has expressed his appreciation for knowing that those resources are there for whatever they need to do. So I would not trade what the support that has grown for Wake football. I would not trade that for what you would be butting your head against at Stanford.
I mean, are we sure where Stanford is in all this? Like, they don't take transfers unless you're a grad transfer in today's environment.
I had some folks reach out and say that they think that Stanford will be making some modifications to its policy. I know Stu Mandel today on The Athletic had a story you've been working on for quite a while about Stanford's downfall and how they're not tough anymore inside their strength program because players had anonymous complaints and they had to, fire the strength coach, blah, 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 which is kind of evident on the field. They also only have, I think, 40 undergrad transfers in the entire university, whereas the average Pac-12 team has 26 transfers on its roster. So, and Stanford only has one who came to the grad school as like a regular student and then walked on to the team. I've had some people who have been right on Stanford stuff before say they're going to make some modifications to that and they're going to get somewhat engaged in NIL. I don't know. I think the bigger question for Clawson is, do you run the risk of Glenn Mason territory there at Wake? This is something I'm probably going to shoot a short on later today, but eventually the reason why a lot of these coaches get fired isn't because they're doing a bad job. And of course, Clawson would never get fired at Wake in any time in the near future. And I'm not saying that, but if you want to keep boosters donating, it's hard to go back to your big booster and say, hey man, we had another 8-4 year. That's a great freaking year at Wake Forest, dude. It really is. If you look at the history of Wake Forest football, 8-4 is awesome. It really is. And these boosters want to hear, we can take the next step. Here's what we can do. Eventually they get tired and they like something new because they want to believe. They want to have some reason to believe to keep donating. That's why you got to cycle through these coaches. Like, why did Tulsa fire Phil Montgomery? He didn't do a bad job at Tulsa. Tulsa's a hard as hell job. Eventually these guys aren't going to donate if you're like, hey man, 5-7 at Tulsa is a good year. It's certainly not a bad year, right? We just beat Houston on the road and you fired the guy. Is there some chance that like eventually like Wake wouldn't get tired of Clawson, right, Chip? I'm trying to think fresh start, restart somewhere. I don't know. I think they're ready to go to the backup and not Hartman personally, but.
Well, wasn't there some rumors flying around about Hartman possibly leaving to go somewhere else?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, do you think he's going to get drafted if he were to go pro? Because I'm not really sure based on this year that he would get drafted.
Ooh, I don't know.
And if he was, it'd be a late 6th or 7th where he's
Yeah.
not going to make the type of money he could make if he transferred somewhere.
I mean, look, guys, these quarterbacks, these senior stay or go late round kids, they're going to get $1 million for sure. Like we know these 5-star quarterbacks are getting $1 million per, and most of them as true freshmen are not going to be doing a whole lot. Like these teams are going to be paying, $850, $1 million, $1.5 million, in some cases, maybe $2 million for these top quarterbacks to come back and be like, you're much more valuable to your team in college if you're a win or win and a half better over replacement than you are as like a 5th round draft pick.
So you're telling me that there will be quarterback rooms with $2 million invested in the room, $1 million for their.
There already are.
There already are, yeah.
I mean, if Richardson comes back to Florida, how much you think's in that quarterback room? Like he's going to be a top draft guy. If for some reason they keep him to come back,
I don't think he's coming back.
Okay. Anything? Where else do we want to go in a pun for the review?
Where's he going?
I will follow your lead, Chip. I'm going to talk about a coach who had a great season in a conference or a division that's frequently disrespected, who we barely spent any time talking about on Saturday night. Illinois won 41-3. I just want to point this out because I didn't really normal on a Sunday. I watch games I didn't get the chance to see on Saturday. I didn't get the chance to do that yesterday. So I don't really have any new insights into any games that I missed to bring up. But I just want to bring this up because I started caring about Illinois when I showed up in Champaign. The record of the first two coaches or the first two seasons for every single Illinois football coach since I started caring, starting at Ron Turner. His first two seasons, 3-19 overall, 2-14 in the Big Ten. He was replaced by Ron Zook, who went 4-19 overall and 1-15 in the Big Ten in his first two seasons. Then came Tim Beckman, who went 6-18 and 1-15 in the Big Ten. Then came Lovie Smith, who went 5-19 in his first two seasons and 2-16 in the Big Ten. After beating Northwestern on Saturday, after his first two seasons in Champaign, Brett Bielema is 13-11 overall and 9-9 in the Big Ten. He has won more Big Ten games in his first two seasons than the previous four coaches did combined. He's done a good job upon further review.
Upon further review, Bielema's out here killing it. And if Ryan Walters leaves, Jim Leonard's coming to be the defensive coordinator. So Illinois for this can once again have one of the nation's best defenses.
That's right. Maybe Sam Hartman will end up in Champaign too. They're going to be in the market for a QB. I know that.
But Danny, anything you want to hit before we get out of here?
No, you want to do USC preview on Wednesday?
Yeah.
All right.
No, let's go ahead and take a look at that because that game's on Friday night.
Yeah.
And that's something that we need to go ahead and like start to get our minds wrapped around because Friday night we've already got the conference championship starting. And we've got first of all, it starts Friday afternoon, Akron and Buffalo playing in the MAC championship game. We got on the mothership, CBS Sports Network, North Texas and UTSA and Conference USA, and then Utah and USC. Now, USC is favored by 3 in this game on the opening line, over under of 67. Do you think that Utah can beat USC twice in one season and play spoiler to the Trojans' college football playoff hopes?
I think they can, certainly. They've already done so once. If you look at it, USC outplayed Notre Dame in terms of explosive plays, and Caleb Williams is just amazing, and he keeps getting better and better. USC at the skill positions, with the exception of Dye, appears to be about as healthy as they have been for most of the year. But also you had some key guys leave that game for USC. Like Gentry doesn't look fully healthy, and Voorhees, one of their starting offensive linemen, left the game. I don't think he came back in, so we don't really know what his status is. There's a very narrow way in which Utah can win this game, and it probably looks exactly like it did up in Salt Lake, right? It's blitz a ton, get a lot of pressure. Maybe Caleb doesn't make the miracle plays. Utah does have better cover guys than Notre Dame showed on Saturday. I'm not saying Notre Dame starters are bad. Don't come at me, Notre Dame fans. What I'm saying is the guys you had out mattered, and you ended up with true freshmen on Jordan Addison and Mario Williams too often, and they cooked them. USC can cover, or Utah can cover USC in a way that I think a lot of Pac-12 teams cannot really do. And so this may come down to how balanced can USC be, because Utah's run defense this year has been pretty poor. On the flip side, what Utah did offensively was impressive, but I also wonder how repeatable it is. Do you guys know Dalton Kincaid had 16 catches for 234 yards in that game?
I do know that. And I also know that Akron Buffalo is a rescheduled game. I just pulled up the schedule, and I know nobody hit me on that. Come on, guys. Akron's got 2 wins on the season. I just pulled up the schedule, and I was like, oh, yeah, nice. We get things started in the afternoon. It's a rescheduled game. But, yeah, I did know Dalton Kincaid has the MAC championship is Toledo and Ohio. That game will be on Saturday.
I don't know that Utah is great along the lines of scrimmage. Cam Rising's going to need to play a hell of a lot better than he played against Oregon, because he was flat out bad against the Ducks. But there's a slim margin, because I don't think USC is going to bully them along the lines of scrimmage, unlike some teams can.
I mean, you mentioned Kincaid's performance. Let's look at what USC did that game. Caleb Williams threw for 381 yards, ran for 57, threw for 5 touchdowns. Jordan Addison caught 7 passes for 106 yards. Mario Williams caught 4 passes for 145 yards. They did all that. Oh, and Travis Dye rushed for 76 and a touchdown. They did all that, and they lost. Because the one thing that didn't happen in that game, at least not repeatedly, was Utah only turned the ball over once. And we have seen that this defense, when they're forcing turnovers, you can't beat USC because you can't keep up with what they're able to do offensively. They're going to put up a minimum of, save for a couple exceptions, the Oregon State game, whatever. But for a minimum, you can expect that they're going to score at least 35 on you. So you have to be able to outscore them. You can't turn the ball over to do that. So if Utah takes care of the ball, yeah, it can beat USC. I wouldn't be shocked if they did it again. That said, I also feel like these are two very different teams than the teams that played in, what was that, October?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I think Utah has I don't think it's bad by any stretch, but I think it's gotten weaker, whereas I feel like USC has gotten stronger. And I feel like right now, Caleb Williams is just kind of on one. I think that even with the loss of Dye, that is an offense that is clicking on all cylinders. I do think that while defensively they have problems, they are getting better, not like markedly where you think, oh, all of a sudden this is a good defense, but I think they're tackling better. I think they're doing a better job of limiting big plays, and then they are coming through with those turnovers when they need them. So going into the rematch, I think I think there's a good shot they're going to get the revenge, but it is not nearly a sure thing. Like you look at the other title games this weekend, it's like TCU and Kansas State's going to be a good game, but I feel like the Big Ten game will be a blowout. The SEC game will be a blowout. This game has a chance to not only with the stakes it has to be the quote most interesting, but I think it's also got a chance to be the most exciting and like kind of craziest game come the fourth quarter.
The other part that Utah might not be able to replicate is that they pinned USC with an absurd average starting field position of its own 20. Like that is really, really bad for a college team because obviously kickoffs come out to the 25. So USC had a ton of yards in that game and a lot of open field to play with. Utah in the red zone was a little bit better than they had been, which was helpful defensively. So they're going to have to keep USC pinned back, make USC be consistent. It's hard to beat Caleb Williams right now, man, if you're not a bully up front. Like, I think USC or Michigan and Georgia would look a little bit different against USC because I don't think they would have to blitz as much to affect the line of scrimmage. But man, Caleb is so good. And on the other hand, look, USC has played 2 wars in a row. Okay. That game felt like USC was in control, but it was close late. They had to go out and get some first downs and make some plays and get that pick. Utah has known they're going to play USC if they win for a while. And they just played a Colorado team that didn't have its starting quarterback and cruised. So my guess here is that Utah could be a little bit fresher. They haven't played a bunch of really, really tough games in a row. Could be helpful.
I also, for Utah stance, I also worry about Cam Rising in this game because if you look at his numbers on the season, like the USC game was his best performance of the year. He threw for 415 yards, 2 touchdowns. Then he missed the Wazoo game the following week. And in the games against Arizona, Stanford, and Oregon after that, he wasn't very good at all. And like he put up huge numbers last week against Colorado, but Colorado. So I just, if this isn't a situation where Utah's going to have to score points to keep up, I don't know that they can right now.
Final point on that, and Tom is exactly right here. After he got hurt, his mobility has been damaged, and he had 11 designed runs in that game against USC for 60 yards. He did not move well against Oregon at all, and I just wonder if this is something. I'm not a doctor. Is that an injury that's going to require some sort of offseason cleanup potentially? Who knows? Did we see the this amazing announcement, by the way? Or John, you want to follow up on Utah? Because I wanted to get this in at the end of the show. Luther Burden, who a lot of people have speculated is going to transfer from Missouri because Dominic Lovett announced his intention, or I think it was reported rather, that he's intending to transfer. That's Missouri's other good receiver. Luther Burden, who was a 5-star last year. This is how he announced he's coming back to the bowl. I don't know if you guys can see this or not. Tremendous here. It's him with a bag of his own chips, the Old Vienna Red Hot. I'm now playing with a all caps chip on my shoulder in this bowl game. Let's go to work. I'm not going anywhere. Tiger for life, MIZ, all caps, 3 exclamation points. Go to Schnucks and grab a bag of LB3 chips.
Good
So-
for him.
That guy is
Look at
going to be a Missouri legend by the time he
Yeah.
is done.
Good for Drinkwitz, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Because,
Yeah.
like, if you lost Lovett and Burden in the offseason, that would not surprise me if that job had opened. Like
Mhm.
you can't do that. His recruiting is one of the reasons he's sticking around.
Yep. Getting him on board was important. Keeping him on board will remain important. And it sounds like they've at least got him all chipped up and set to go. So very, very good stuff for the Missouri Tigers. We will be back on Tuesday night with instant reaction to the new college football playoff rankings. Then on Wednesday, more looking ahead to conference championship weekend. And because we are done with November, that also means Tux is coming out, baby. November superlatives. So we'll do conference championship previews, November superlatives on Wednesday. Thursday, our conference championship locks. So much to get to. And you can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fernelli. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Y'all hit the numbers. Sorry. Drop your Twitter handles in the chat right now. Go ahead and drop them and make sure you're following the Cover 3 podcast on Twitter. We asked and you delivered. We surpassed the number of likes required so that we could give away these 30-day Paramount Plus premium plan free trials. So go ahead and drop them in the chat. Go ahead. And we will get in touch with some lucky winners for those Paramount Plus free trials. You can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fernelli. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. You follow him at Bud Elliott 3. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See y'all.